Most people know Toyota as the safe answer, the car that starts every morning, the badge you buy when you don't want drama. Reliable, sensible, almost boring. But Toyota's origin story is the opposite of boring, because it didn't begin with cars at all. It began with thread. In early 20th century Japan, the Toyota family built machines that wove fabric faster, cleaner, and with less waste than anyone thought possible. Their breakthrough wasn't horsepower or chrome. It was a simple obsession. Eliminate failure, spot defects instantly, and keep improving the process, one tiny step at a time. That mindset would later reshape an industry that runs on steel and gasoline. Here's the twist. The money that helped Toyota enter the car business was earned by selling a loom patent. A textile invention financed an automotive gamble. And for years, that gamble looked reckless. Japan had little experience building passenger cars. The world was dominated by American and European giants, and the first attempts were rough. So how did a company born in textile workshops, focused on quiet efficiency, end up building some of the most trusted machines on Earth? How did Toyota, a name stamped on looms, become Toyota, a global symbol of manufacturing excellence? This is the story of how a tangle of thread led to a road-conquering empire, and why that unlikely beginning explains everything that came after. And it starts with a workshop floor where a single broken strand was treated like a crisis. And a clue. Before Toyota ever shaped steel into cars, it shaped a different kind of precision. In the Toyota workshops, the enemy wasn't speed, it was waste. A loom could run fast and still be a failure if it chewed thread, produced flawed fabric, or needed constant babysitting. The goal was simple: make a machine that could be trusted when no one was watching. That's where the Toyota mindset was forged. Not in racing, not in style, but in reliability. Sakichi Toyoda, often called Japan's king of inventors, kept returning to the same question. How do you build a machine that protects quality by design? His most famous idea was almost philosophical. If something goes wrong, the machine should stop. Don't hide defects. Expose them. Fix the root cause. Then improve the process so it doesn't happen again. In a textile mill, that thinking mattered because a single snapped thread could ruin an entire run of fabric. But the bigger lesson was deeper. Quality isn't inspected at the end. It's built into the system. And once you see production that way, you start measuring everything. Time, motion, mistakes, downtime, even human fatigue. By the 1920s and 30s, the company had become successful not because it made perfect products, but because it built a culture that hunted tiny problems relentlessly. Every improvement was small. Every change was tested. Every failure was studied, not ignored. So when the Toyota family started looking beyond looms, they didn't just carry money into the next industry. They carried a method, a way of thinking, a promise that whatever they built next, it would be designed to work, again and again and again. And that promise was about to collide with the hardest machine of all, the automobile. By the early 1930s, the Toyota company was good at one thing: building machines that ran smoothly, wasted less, and improved with every version. But Japan was changing fast. The country wanted modern industry, modern transport, and less dependence on imports. Cars weren't just products, they were strategy. At the same time, the streets were filling with foreign vehicles. American brands especially were everywhere, assembled locally from imported parts. For a young engineer like Kiichiro Toyoda, that was both an insult and an invitation. If Japan could master precision machinery, why couldn't it master the automobile, the most complex machine ordinary people would ever buy? The decision wasn't romantic, it was risky. Building cars meant steel supply, engines, gearboxes, tools, and an entire network of suppliers that barely existed. The big players had decades of head start. And the Toyota business was still, at its core, a loom company. Switching industries could have destroyed it. But Kiichiro believed the same logic that made a great loom could make a great car. Learn by building, improve by measuring, and never accept defects as normal. So a new division was formed, quietly at first, inside a company that many still saw as textile. Engineers studied foreign cars, tore them down, copied what they had to, and experimented with what they didn't understand yet. This wasn't genius overnight. It was determined, methodical learning. Exactly the kind Toyota would become famous for later. And then came the point of no return. The company committed real resources, real people, and real reputation to a machine it had never built before. Toyota's car story didn't begin with a masterpiece. It began with a national push, an engineer's stubborn vision, and a decision that could have ended everything. When Toyota finally started building cars, it didn't look like a future empire. It looked like a workshop trying to solve 1,000 problems at once. Engines were unfamiliar, tooling was expensive, materials were inconsistent, and every part of a car demanded a level of coordination that looms never required. So Toyota did what new car makers usually do. It studied the best, copied what it could, and learned by taking things apart. Engineers bought foreign sedans, dismantled them bolt by bolt, and treated them like textbooks made of steel. The early goal wasn't to beat Ford or Chevrolet, it was to prove they could build a functioning passenger car at all. The first prototypes were clumsy. Some components were heavily inspired by American designs because there was no time for pride. But even in those rough beginnings, you can see Toyota's future personality. Constant measurement, constant correction, and an obsession with making parts fit the same way every time. Then came the milestone that mattered more than style, the first production model. It wasn't glamorous, it was a statement. Japan could build its own car. And the company could now learn in the real world, with real customers, real breakdowns, and real pressure. Of course, early customers and competitors were not impressed. Reliability wasn't legendary yet. Performance wasn't special. Toyota's name carried no prestige. But that's the point. This phase wasn't about perfection. It was about building the feedback loop. Design, test, fix, repeat. Toyota didn't begin as a miracle. It began as a stubborn experiment that refused to stop iterating. And that habit, more than any single model, was the seed of everything that followed. By the late 1940s, Toyota had survived its awkward beginning, but survival wasn't success. Japan was rebuilding from ruins, materials were scarce, and people didn't have money for new cars. Demand was weak, inflation was high, and the company was trying to operate in a world where almost everything, steel, fuel, parts, was rationed or unreliable. Toyota's factories could build vehicles, but building vehicles didn't automatically mean selling them. Trucks were needed, yes, but margins were thin and costs kept rising. Inside the company, pressure mounted. Layoffs, wage disputes, and the fear that Toyota might simply run out of cash. This wasn't the romantic startup struggle. It was the kind of crisis that ends companies quietly, one unpaid bill at a time. Then came the breaking point. In 1949 to 1950, Toyota faced a financial collapse serious enough that management announced major job cuts. Workers resisted. Strikes followed. The company was split between keeping people employed and keeping the company alive. For a business built on stability and trust, the conflict was devastating. Out of that storm came a painful lesson. Toyota couldn't survive by building some cars. It needed a system that could produce efficiently even when volumes were low, cash was tight, and mistakes were expensive. It had to learn how to make quality cheaper, not by cutting corners, but by cutting waste. This crisis did something crucial. It forced Toyota to stop thinking like a small manufacturer and start thinking like a machine for continuous improvement. The brand's future reputation for reliability wasn't born in comfort. It was forged under the threat of failure, when every defect, every delay, and every wasted motion could be the difference between recovery and collapse. And the solution Toyota found would change manufacturing forever. Toyota didn't escape its crisis by getting lucky. It escaped by rebuilding the company around a new idea. In a world with little cash and little room for mistakes, the only way to survive is to make problems visible and eliminate them fast. This is where Toyota's production philosophy hardened into something revolutionary. One pillar came straight from the Loom days, jidoka, automation with a human touch. The principle is simple. When something goes wrong, you stop the line. Not tomorrow, not at the end of the shift, right now. A defect isn't bad news, it's a signal. If you keep the line running, you're just producing broken cars faster. The second pillar was just in time. Toyota couldn't afford mountains of inventory sitting around like a rich American factory, so it aimed to build only what was needed, when it was needed, in the exact amount needed. That forced the whole system to become precise: suppliers, schedules, parts flow, and worker routines. Every extra step, every delay, every pile of unused parts became an enemy. Then came the habit that tied it together: Kaizen, continuous improvement. Not a slogan on a poster, but a daily ritual. Small fixes, repeated endlessly, beat big redesigns that happen once a decade. Workers weren't treated as hands, they were treated as sensors, people closest to the problems, capable of solving them. Put these ideas together, and Toyota built something bigger than a car. A factory that learns. And once a factory learns faster than its rivals, quality stops being a cost. It becomes an advantage. Toyota's legend wasn't born from one perfect model. It was built on a system that made imperfection impossible to ignore and easy to correct. A system is only proven when it meets the outside world. By the late 1950s and 60s, Toyota had learned how to build cars with discipline and repeatability, but it still faced a brutal question. Would anyone outside Japan care? The first exports were not triumphant. In the United States, Japanese car was almost a punchline. American roads were wide, fuel was cheap, engines were big, and buyers expected effortless power. Early Toyota models felt underpowered, unfamiliar, and, worst of all, untrusted. Toyota wasn't just selling metal, it was selling credibility. So the company did something that would define its global rise. It treated foreign markets like a test lab. It watched what broke, listened to complaints, measured everything, and changed the product, not slowly, but relentlessly. If Americans wanted stronger heaters, tougher suspensions, and better high-speed comfort, Toyota didn't argue. It improved. Quietly. At the same time, Toyota's manufacturing approach gave it a weapon Western automakers underestimated: consistency. While competitors chased style cycles and big redesigns, Toyota focused on repeatable quality, cars that started, ran, and aged predictably. Word spread the old-fashioned way, through owners. Then, as Toyota's reputation hardened, the company began building a real foothold: dealers, parts supply, service training, and eventually, local production. The strategy wasn't to storm America. It was to outlast everyone. By the time many rivals looked up, Toyota wasn't a novelty anymore. It was a serious competitor with a growing base of loyal customers, people who didn't buy Toyota because it was exciting, but because it never demanded attention. Toyota had entered the global game. The next step was the moment the world gave it an unfair advantage, a crisis that made reliability and efficiency suddenly priceless. In the early 1970s, the rules of the car world changed overnight. For decades, many markets, especially the United States, had been built around cheap fuel and big engines. Power was normal, efficiency was optional, and reliability was something you hoped for, not demanded. Then the oil shocks hit. Fuel prices jumped, lines formed at gas stations, and drivers who had never cared about miles per gallon suddenly cared about nothing else. Overnight, the question in showrooms flipped from "how fast is it?" to "how far can it go? And will it break?" This was Toyota's moment, not because Toyota predicted the crisis, but because it had been building for a different reality all along. Its cars were smaller, lighter, and designed with efficiency in mind. Its factories were trained to waste less, and its quality system produced vehicles that owners could trust when budgets were tight and repairs were scary. Western automakers tried to react, but reacting is not the same as being ready. Changing a product line takes years. Changing a manufacturing culture can take decades. Many companies rushed out smaller cars that felt compromised, cheaply built, underdeveloped, and often unreliable. Toyota's cars, by contrast, felt like they had been meant to exist. And as Toyota's reputation grew, it created a flywheel effect. Satisfied owners became unpaid salespeople. Dealers gained confidence. Resale values rose. Toyota didn't just sell cars, it sold peace of mind at a moment when the world felt uncertain. This is the point where Toyota stopped being a clever outsider and became a default choice. The crisis didn't create Toyota's strengths, it simply exposed them and made the market reward them. And once a company becomes the safe bet, the next question is dangerous. Can it also become the aspirational one? By the 1980s, Toyota had achieved something rare: mass trust. People bought Corollas and Camrys because they worked. But trust has a ceiling. If you're only known for being sensible, you risk becoming invisible, and you leave the high-profit, high-prestige space to someone else. So Toyota made a bold move. It decided to build a luxury car that could stand next to Mercedes and BMW and not apologize. The project was secretive, expensive, and almost obsessive. Engineers chased silence, smoothness, and durability with the same intensity they once chased efficiency. The result was Lexus, and its first big statement, the LS 400, didn't just enter the luxury market, it disrupted it. The shock wasn't that Lexus was good for the money, it was that it was good, full stop. Quiet, refined, and built with a level of consistency that made old assumptions look lazy. Toyota had proven it could build aspiration, not just practicality. Then came the second proof: technology with purpose. In the 1990s, while many automakers treated electrification as a concept car fantasy, Toyota pushed hybrids into the real world. The Prius wasn't launched as a sports icon. It was launched as a system, an engine and motor working together to save fuel, cut emissions, and reduce dependence on oil. Again, it wasn't glamorous at first, but it was reliable, scalable, and perfectly timed. Lexus showed Toyota could win on prestige. Prius showed Toyota could lead on efficiency. Together, they shattered the idea that Toyota was just boring. It wasn't boring, it was disciplined. And discipline at global scale is how you become number one. Toyota's rise can look like a straight line in hindsight. Small cars, great reliability, global dominance. But the real story is messier and more interesting because Toyota didn't win by inventing one magical car. It won by building a machine that improves. That's why the loom matters. In a textile mill, a snapped thread is tiny, but the damage can spread fast. The Toyota mindset treated that tiny failure as unacceptable, not because perfection is romantic, but because small defects multiply. That same logic scales brutally well to cars. If you can spot problems early, stop them, learn from them, and redesign the process, you don't just make better products, you make a better company. Toyota's biggest innovation wasn't a model name, it was a habit. Make the invisible visible. Cut waste. Respect the people closest to the work. Fix the root cause, not the symptom. Repeat forever. And over time, that habit created compounding advantages. Factories got more consistent. Suppliers got tighter. Costs went down without quality going down. Customers started trusting the badge. Trust created volume. Volume funded better engineering. Better engineering reinforced trust. The flywheel kept spinning. That's how a former loom maker could take on century-old giants and win. Not by being the loudest, not by being the flashiest, but by being the most disciplined at scale. So when you see a Toyota today, whether it's a humble Corolla, a luxury Lexus, or a hybrid taxi racking up endless miles, you're looking at the same idea that once lived in a workshop full of thread, a refusal to accept good enough, and a system designed to get better every single day. The road to number one started on a factory floor, listening for the sound of a thread breaking.